Wow, hospitals in New York are really something else. I came to a university hospital in New York when I was 38. Thomas? A passing doctor called my name, with his eyes wide open in surprise as he stopped. Joshua? Joshua and I were classmates who had both aimed to become doctors together. Although I had to drop out of college for a reason. Joshua had actually achieved his dream. Seeing Joshua in his white coat made me smile a little, but his face remained tense. A strange tension happened between us. Then Joshua suddenly chuckled. What's a dropout like you doing in a place like this? Oh, I get it, you're here for some tests because you're too dumb? I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Joshua. What the heck is with that tone? Joshua seemed he was completely looking down on me for giving up on becoming a doctor. Just then, a woman came running towards us. Director Nash, there you are. I'm Allison, the secretary to the board of directors at this hospital. Joshua, with a smile, started talking to Allison, who was out of breath. Director? This guy? He's not even a doctor. Allison looked at Joshua with a serious expression. Director Nash is a respectable doctor. Yeah, I'm the new director here starting today. What? Joshua's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between Allison and me. This way to the boardroom. Ignoring Joshua, Allison led me to the boardroom. My name is Thomas. I grew up in a single-parent home with my mom and my sister, Michelle, who is 2 years younger than me. We lived in a small apartment. Just the three of us. When I was in elementary school, a huge mansion was built diagonally across from us. It looked like a luxury hotel. The size of the house was the talk of the neighborhood even while it was being built. I wish we could live in such a big house, even just once. I wonder who lives there. Michelle would always stop there on her way back from school, daydreaming about living in that house. Hey, move aside. Do you need something from my house? A voice came from behind us. When we turned around, we saw a familiar face. Oh. You're in class 2, right? You're the new boy who just transferred from other school, aren't you? The boy standing there with a serious expression nodded silently. I'm Thomas, from class 3. This is my sister Michelle, she's in the first grade. When Michelle greeted him, he did the same. What's your name? Josh. Nice to meet you, Josh. I extended my hand, and Joshua stared at it. Come on, shake hands. I grabbed Joshua's hand and gave it a firm shake. What a pain. Joshua said so as he pulled his hand away and walked through the large gate into his house. He's kind of prickly, I thought. Even a month after being transferred, Joshua still didn't seem to have made any friends and always walked home alone after school. No wonder he didn't have any friends, acting so prickly like that. I collected Michelle from her classroom and hurried after Joshua. Oh, it's you, Thomas. Let's walk home together. Joshua didn't respond, just turned around and kept walking briskly. Josh, wait. Oh, sorry. Joshua waited silently until Michelle caught up. He was always cold and curt with me, but he was gentle with Michelle. This guy wasn't so bad. I felt that instinctively. One day, as I was heading to soccer training, I saw Joshua about to leave as well. Josh. Do you like soccer? Joshua stared at the soccer ball I was holding. I don't like soccer. Wow, there are actually people who don't like soccer. I have the most fun when I play soccer. Just as I was about to tell him all the good things of playing soccer, Joshua spoke up first. I'm off to tutoring now. Tutoring? But we're just kids, do you need it? None of my friends go to tutoring. I'm going to be a great doctor like my dad. I don't have time to play like you, Thomas. Joshua quickly rode off on his bike after saying that to me. Joshua's dad is a doctor who runs a clinic in the next town. Doctors must really love studying. Just like I love soccer, Joshua must love studying. He's impressive. I couldn't help but respect Joshua. The next morning, I spotted Joshua on my way to school and approached him. Let's play soccer sometime. When are you free? Joshua glanced at me but quickly looked away. I told you yesterday, I don't have any free time. I have 3 tutors. I need to study hard to become a doctor. If I have time to kick a ball, I'd rather hold a pencil. I wanted to show him how fun soccer could be. But does he even enjoy studying? I wondered, but Joshua's determination made me keep quiet. Just then, Michelle joined us. Josh, you want to be a doctor? That's awesome. Please cure my illness. Illness? Joshua looked a bit troubled by Michelle's favor to him with her twinkling eyes. Michelle had been weak since she was little, constantly in and out of the hospital. Her condition had stabilized enough that she only needed monthly checkups, but a simple cold could get worse quickly, so we had to be very careful. That's why you always wear a mask. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Joshua gently patted Michelle's head, who must wear a mask in crowded places. All right. I'll cure your illness, Michelle. Just wait until I become a doctor. Hearing Joshua's words, Michelle jumped up and down with joy. Seeing them, a feeling of unease grew inside me. Then, I'll become a doctor too. Before I knew it, I had shouted like that. Both of them looked at me with wide eyes. I'll be the one to cure Michelle's illness. You can't beat me, Joshua. I don't even know what kind of thought process led me to that declaration. But seeing Michelle's happy face directed at Joshua, I felt a bit jealous and thought that it should be me, her brother, protecting her, not Joshua. But you hate studying, Thomas. It's okay, Joshua will cure my illness. No. I'm the one who will do that. Joshua laughed as he watched the rare argument between us. From that day, I studied so hard, which made everyone around me surprised. Of course, I continued playing soccer, but I started waking up an hour earlier to study. That was my study method. Unlike Joshua's family, my family couldn't afford tutoring or private lessons. But if I studied hard on my own, I could definitely become a doctor. Believing this, I worked hard at my studies. Here, I had some extra worksheets. If you're interested, try solving them. Joshua, though blunt, reached out to help me. Joshua seemed cold and prickly, but he was actually kind-hearted. He wore clothes that looked a bit fancier than ours and never laughed out loud at jokes, always keeping cool. This made Joshua seem unapproachable, and he was often alone. But he never bragged about his wealth, or looked down on my single-parent home or our inability to afford tutoring. He didn't laugh at me for wanting to become a doctor despite always playing soccer. If you don't understand something, just ask. You won't solve it by thinking alone. He casually offered to support my studies. I grew to like this about Joshua. Even though we both aimed to become doctors, we ended up taking different paths when we started middle school. Joshua took an entrance exam and went to a prestigious private middle school for the wealthy people. On the other hand, I couldn't afford private school and went to the local public middle school. Even though we attended different schools, we saw each other every morning since we lived nearby. Morning. Perfect timing. About this arithmetic problem. Use this formula. But you should have asked me the night before, we'll be late for school. Yeah, sorry. Our relationship felt more like I was relying on Joshua than us being good friends. But Joshua never complained and always helped me. I'll buy you something next time. Joshua shook his head. I don't need a treat. Just make sure you really become a doctor. You're going to cure Michelle's illness, right? Yeah, I will. Joshua patted my shoulder and smiled. Together, we'll become doctors. And we'll cure Michelle's illness. With this strong will, I kept my grades at the top in the middle school. I also excelled in the soccer club, balancing both academics and sports. This achievement earned me a scholarship to a high school where many aimed to become doctors. Well done. Joshua's rare compliment made me very happy. However, even with the scholarship, high school was expensive. So, I started working part-time at a restaurant instead of joining a school club. Are you managing your studies? Joshua expressed his concern. Yeah, I just replaced the time I used for soccer with work. Plus, I get free meals at the restaurant. Joshua, knowing my situation, didn't say anything more. He silently respected my decision. I trusted Joshua the most even though I never said that. In high school, surrounded by high achievers, I faced frustrations and setbacks I hadn't encountered before. But I was glad to be there without having to rely on tutoring. Soon enough, 3 years of high school flew by, and it was time for college entrance exams. I applied to the local university, while Joshua applied to be university in New York. The results, we both got accepted. For the first time, Joshua showed his emotions, and we hugged each other with joy. Thomas, you really did it. Getting in without tutoring is amazing. Joshua was genuinely happy for me, celebrating as if it were his own achievement. Joshua, thank you for everything. For teaching me, for quietly supporting me. Having Joshua by my side, determined to become a doctor, helped me follow in his footsteps. But we'll be apart in college. Suddenly, a wave of sadness hit me. We're finally at the starting line, so what's that face? Because I'm worried about managing on my own without you around, Joshua. The more I thought about life without Joshua, the more anxious I felt. Joshua gave me a firm slap on the back. We're going to become doctors together. Now, let's shake on it. Joshua extended his hand. I hesitated but then reached out, and Joshua gave me a firm handshake. I remembered that 9 years ago, it was me who had initiated our first handshake. Thinking of how prickly Joshua used to be made me laugh. What's so funny? Joshua pouted. Nothing. Next time we shake hands, we'll be doctors. With that, I squeezed his hand tightly. I started my college life locally, while Joshua began his in New York. I quickly made friends and joined a futsal club. I also tutored part-time, studied with friends at diners before tests. The studies were tough, but I was living a fulfilling life every day. I only saw Joshua during long breaks when he came back home. We rarely contacted each other, but it seemed Joshua was also enjoying his life in New York. Time flew by, and soon I was in my 3rd year of college. One day during class, I received a rare call on my phone. I had it on silent, so I waited for it to stop vibrating in my pocket, but the call kept coming. I reluctantly took out my phone and saw that it was my mom calling. She knew I was in class. For her to call now, it had to be an emergency. Michelle's smiling face flashed in my mind. I rushed out of the classroom. Recently, Michelle hadn't been feeling well. For the past year, she had been in and out of the hospital frequently. I quickly called my mom back. Thomas, I'm sorry. Can you come home right away? It's Michelle. What happened to Michelle? My heart was pounding, but my mom's voice was trembling even more. I am going to be a doctor. I steadied myself to calm my mom and listen to her. Mom said that Michelle had suddenly lost consciousness and collapsed. She had called an ambulance, and Michelle was now in the hospital. However, she was in the ICU, and the situation was critical. I'll head to the hospital immediately. It's going to be okay, Mom. Michelle is a strong girl, I said, trying to reassure myself as much as my mom. Then I rushed to the hospital. Michelle. Lying in bed, Michelle was connected to numerous tubes, and her condition looked worse than I had imagined. Michelle, I'll cure your illness, so hang in there. Michelle? Hey, Michelle. The alarm on the heart monitor went off, and doctors and nurses rushed into the room. My mother and I were pushed to the corner of the room, unable to do anything but stand there. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts, Michelle passed away. Michelle was gone in an instant. All I could do was standing in the corner of the room. I felt utterly helpless. During the funeral, Joshua stayed by my side in silence. You should eat something. Joshua handed me a sandwich as I sat there in a daze after everything was over. I stared at his hand. Joshua, I'm quitting becoming a doctor, I said, looking down. I had no reason to become a doctor anymore, since Michelle was gone. Joshua peered into my face. His eyes widened, and he shook his head. What are you talking about? We promised to become doctors together. I'm sorry. You worked so hard. I'm sorry. You said we'd shake hands again once we became doctors. I'm sorry. At Michelle's funeral, Joshua, who had been supporting me while holding back his own tears, finally broke down and cried. I turned away from Joshua. After a while, Joshua stood up. Goodbye. He turned and walked away slowly. Lost in grief, I didn't have any strength to chase after him but continued crying alone. Having lost the purpose of becoming a doctor, I stopped attending classes at the university. Thomas, what are you going to do now? My mom, who had always let me pursue what I wanted, asked worriedly. I'm quitting university and going to work. I've already talked to Ken, the manager at the restaurant where I worked in high school. I won't cause you any trouble, Mom. I see. Mom didn't say anything more. So, I really dropped out of college. Time passed, and now I'm 38 years old. Today, I'm at a very large hospital in New York. Wow, hospitals in New York are really something else. I was overwhelmed by the size and got completely lost inside the huge building. As I wandered around, I made eye contact with a doctor walking toward me. Thomas? The doctor stopped, with his eyes wide open in surprise. Joshua? The name tag on the doctor's white coat clearly read Joshua. And it also said physician before his name. Joshua had achieved his dream. He had become a physician to take over his family's practice in the future. Seeing Joshua in his white coat made me smile a little, but his face remained tense. A strange tension happened between us. Then Joshua suddenly laughed. What's a dropout like you doing in a place like this? Oh, I get it, you're here for some tests because you're too dumb? I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Joshua. What the heck is with that attitude? I felt a surge of irritation. Joshua seemed completely looking down on me for giving up on becoming a doctor. Just then, a woman came running toward us. Director Nash, there you are. I'm Allison, the secretary to board of directors at this hospital. Out of breath, Allison spoke to Joshua with a smile. Director? This guy? He's not even a doctor. Allison looked at Joshua with a serious expression. Director Nash is a respectable doctor. Yeah, I'm the new director here starting today. What? Joshua's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between Allison and me. This way to the boardroom. Ignoring Joshua, Allison led me to the boardroom. After greeting the board members, I started organizing the director's office. So this is my workplace from now on. Can I really handle working in such a big hospital? Moreover, can I manage the role of a director, leading other doctors? And Joshua is here too. A wave of anxiety washed over me. Just then, my phone rang. Hello, this is Thomas. Yes, I'll be there right away. There was an urgent call for help from the ER. I quickly changed and ran to the ER. Wait. Is it this way? As I got lost, I felt a push from behind. Don't space out. The ER is this way. Hurry. It was Joshua. He must have also received the call for help. I followed Joshua. Thomas, what's your specialty? Surgery. Then take care of this patient. Joshua pointed to a patient with an open fracture. Got it. With the help of the nurses, I worked desperately to save this patient in front of me, as a doctor. After finishing the surgery, I left the operating room to find Joshua waiting for me. Good job. Joshua handed me a can of coffee, his tone gruff. Thanks. I took the coffee, but I didn't know what to talk. Suddenly, Joshua apologized earnestly. Thomas, I'm really sorry for what I said earlier. He kept apologizing over and over. Memories of our first meeting and all our shared experiences flashed through my mind, and I couldn't help but laugh. What's so funny? Joshua pouted. It's just you never speak badly about anyone. I figured you must have really tried hard earlier to be sarcastic. Joshua's face rapidly turned red. Joshua never laughed at me when I said I wanted to be a doctor, despite being a soccer fanatic. Even when I struggled with my study, that Joshua could solve in 5 minutes, he would encourage me, saying you just needed practice. When I felt like giving up because I couldn't afford tutoring, he convinced me by saying, I'll teach you, so it's like going to a tutor. Joshua had lived a life free of speaking ill of others. You gave up on becoming a doctor so easily, I couldn't forgive you without saying something snarky. Hearing Joshua's honest feelings made me reflect on my decision to drop out of college. Are you done for the day? I have so many questions for you. How about we go grab a drink? Sure. Let's go. We got ready to leave and headed to Joshua's favorite bar. I'm relieved. About what? I was worried you'd take me to some fancy French restaurant. Joshua laughed. Our family backgrounds had always been vastly different. Joshua was the wealthy son of a doctor. I was from a single-parent household, working part-time jobs since high school. But now, sitting in a bar with Joshua, having a beer and reminiscing, I was incredibly happy. So, you didn't actually quit college, huh? I shook my head quietly at Joshua's words. Then why are you? I downed my beer in one go and started to talk about what happened after Michelle passed away. Losing Michelle made me feel that becoming a doctor was meaningless. For about a month, I stayed at home, lost in thought. I thought a lot, and sometimes I went as far as the university gates, but memories of Michelle kept me from entering the classroom. I realized it wasn't that I didn't want to become a doctor, I felt I couldn't. On the day I went to submit my withdrawal papers, I happened to run into a professor of surgery. The path isn't always straight. You have plenty of time, Thomas. If you ever want to come back, you're always welcomed. This professor had treated Michelle when she was young. And he was teaching at the university. He was very happy when I got into the university and always kept an eye on me. His words were comforting, but at the time, I was certain I would never return to the field of medicine. After that, I started working at the restaurant where I had worked part-time in high school. Working kept my mind off Michelle, so I worked almost without taking a break. Do you enjoy working at the restaurant? I do. That's good to hear. My mom quietly supported me during that time. 2 years passed, and one day, something happened. While working, a customer suddenly collapsed from his chair. Are you okay? Ken, call an ambulance and bring the AED. My body moved before I could think. Amid the commotion, I performed CPR and used the AED. When the ambulance arrived, I provided detailed information about the customer's condition to the paramedics. The paramedics were surprised by my effective treatment before they arrived and the information I gave. Are you in the medical field? No, I'm an employee here. Thank you so much. We'll take it from here. They bowed deeply and hurried away. Thomas, thank you. If you hadn't been here, I wouldn't have been able to help that valuable customer, Ken said. Everyone in the restaurant, including Ken, gave me a warm round of applause. I was filled with an indescribable sense of exhilaration. After closing the restaurant, Ken treated me to a beer as a thank you. Thank you so much for today. I think you should really consider becoming a doctor again, Thomas. Ken looked at me closely. Me? No way, I only have a high school diploma. Professor Baker had told me I could come back if I wanted, but that was 2 years ago. There are countless students, and the professor has probably forgotten about me by now. As I was thinking this, Ken patted my shoulder. Professor Baker was worried about you too. What? Professor Baker from the Department of Surgery? Ken smiled. It turned out Professor Baker was a regular customer at the restaurant. Even though he became busier after becoming a professor and didn't come as often, he still visited several times over the past 2 years. I hadn't noticed at all, but it made sense. Being in charge of the kitchen, I didn't often see the customers' faces. Professor Baker often watched you working from a distance. I wondered what he was thinking as he watched me cooking. Ken seemed to understand my thoughts and continued. He said if you were doing what you wanted, that was good. He believed Michelle would respect your decision even if you weren't a doctor. Thinking of Michelle always following me around made my chest tighten. Ken cleared his throat. But, Thomas, working here isn't what you truly want, is it? Ken's face was serious. No, that's not true. I feel very fulfilled working here every day. I wasn't lying. Ken, who typically didn't hire high school students, had given me a chance when I explained my family situation. Here, I learned how to conduct myself as an adult. After dropping out of university, Ken was the only person I could talk to about my future. Stay here and work until you can sort out your feelings without worrying your mom. Of course, you're always welcome to keep working here. Ken said gently. Working hard for Ken became my source of passion for my job. Ken shook his head slowly. Thomas, you must have felt something today. Be honest with yourself. I decided to support you with everything I had when you worked hard to become a doctor despite your family circumstances. Ken's eyes became a bit teary with emotion. I hadn't realized he felt that way about me. I closed my eyes. The fulfillment I felt today while desperately tending to the collapsed customer. At some point, I realized I wanted to save not only Michelle but many people. Of course, I wanted to save Michelle, but I also wanted to help many more patients. That's what I just realized. Ken, I've decided to try to become a doctor again. Ken nodded vigorously in agreement. So, you decided to aim to become a doctor again? Yeah. Ken gave me part-time work, which allowed me time to study hard. Studying alone was tough. I realized how much I relied on you back then. To be honest, I often wanted to reach out to Joshua. But whenever I remembered how he walked away after Michelle's funeral, I felt I shouldn't rely on him easily. I decided I would see him again once I became a doctor. That was my goal, and I worked hard for it. Taking a hard look at my life, I dove headfirst into my path to becoming a doctor without hesitation. I will become a doctor who can save more lives than anyone else. And I'll meet Joshua with my head held high. With that determination, I threw myself into my studies. Following Professor Baker's advice, I even spent a year studying in England. You went to England? Joshua was surprised. Yeah, I got close to a professor there during my exchange. I was able to return to England after graduation. That's how I got more experienced my surgical skills in England. I came back from England about 6 months ago. Professor Baker is acquainted with the board members here and pushed for me to become the director. Explaining it to him, I realized again how much had happened. After listening to my story, Joshua downed his beer in one go. Then, he extended his right hand. Ha! Come on. Joshua took my right hand and shook it firmly. We promised, didn't we? We'd shake hands again when we both became doctors. I felt tears welling up. Thomas, you did great. I never thought we'd get to see each other every day like this again. Perhaps because of the alcohol, even Joshua, who was usually composed, wiped away his tears in front of everyone. I'm sorry about back then, Joshua. Will you still be my friend? Of course. Friend, though technically, I'm your boss. Don't say that. I felt humbled to become Joshua's boss at work. Seeing my reaction, Joshua laughed softly. You'll be fine, Thomas. But feel free to come to me with anything. I'm always on your side. We shook hands again firmly. Since then, we have been working hard together as doctors, encouraging each other to be better. Director Nash, about this case. Stop it. Joshua teased me. Joshua, about this. I still rely on Joshua just like in our student days. Thanks for everything, Joshua. I'll treat you something next time. How about sushi? Ha! I was caught off guard by his unexpected response. Joshua laughed heartily at my reaction. I'm kidding. I haven't done anything worth being treated for. Just keep up the good work. Thanks, Joshua. With Joshua nearby, I feel like I can achieve even more. I want to save many lives as a doctor from now on. Wendy slightly raised the corners of her mouth. I've been a fan of yours since the day I first heard your performance. Teased with a playful smile, I froze. My name is Chris, I'm 30 years old. Currently, I'm learning to play the harp from Wendy, who is the next master of the Bud Association. Play that note a bit stronger, it's too soft. As she said this, Wendy plucked the strings. A pleasantly strong sound filled the room. My notes don't quite sound like Wendy's notes. Getting this one clear note right is quite difficult. Music is a series of these notes. If any note is too weak or too strong, it sounds odd, but aligning them all is truly challenging. Of course, it's not enough just to align them, intentional dynamics are also necessary. It's head spinning, but fun. Incredibly fun. The harp itself is a beautiful instrument. Each one has unique wood grain pattern and artisanal details. Harps handmade by craftsmen take a year to complete. Just being able to touch such a soul-filled instrument is a joy. The sound also varies depending on the player. I can only produce a thin sound, but Wendy's notes are a complex and pleasant mix of power and elegance. I never thought I'd get to do music again. As I listened to the sounds, I became contemplative. Both of my parents were pianists, and especially my father was well known. Working as an exclusive pianist for a luxury hotel and belonging to a music agency. After giving birth, my mother started running a piano school and has sent many students out into the world. Naturally, my older brother and I were also raised touching the piano from a young age. And to speak for myself, I was a prodigy. I stood out from an early age, winning every competition I entered. The judges gave me incredibly high evaluations, and I was raised being called a wunderkind. At first, I was simply happy that my practice was recognized. But gradually, the voices around me started to bother me. The jealousy of peers who missed winning because I was there. The pressure from judges who said, "We expect great things next time too." And from my parents, the dream that one day you will conquer the world. What was supposed to be enjoyable unknowingly became a shackle. My brother went to a well-known specialized music high school. But I wanted to stay at home to avoid cutting into practice time. My wishes were granted and I was allowed to attend a local high school. My parents thought that a music-saturated education from high school would add prestige. But a genius pianist from a regular high school wasn't a bad title either, it seemed. But maybe it would have been better to get away from my parents at that point. My brother didn't go abroad but attended a local music college. The college was famous in the US, yet my parents' dream of a college abroad was strong, and their guidance for me intensified. And then, in the winter of my first year of high school, at a competition where famous international pianists were judges and my parents placed enormous expectations on me, I couldn't move from the wings of the stage. My name was called, and I was supposed to stride onto the stage confidently. But my legs wouldn't move. My hands and feet were cold, and I couldn't stop trembling. Sweat, whether cold or from nervousness, dripped down. I wasn't nervous. The more those around me panicked, and the more they worried, the more my body stiffened, and I had to withdraw from that competition. I can't forget the look of despair on my parents' faces, even now. At the same time, I remember feeling a bit relieved. This meant I could finally say goodbye to my life consumed by competitions. I thought surely my parents would ease their expectations of me. But the reality was the exact opposite. They forced me, trembling, to sit at the piano and demanded I play, even if it was just a simple song. Not playing for even a day would dull my skills. My parents' desperation grew day by day. They started gently guiding me to the piano, but gradually their words became harsher. It was my brother who protected me from our parents. Thomas argued that I should be allowed to rest now and forcefully took me out to have some fun. "Tom, weren't you jealous of me? You don't really like me, do you?" I threw those impolite and intrusive words at him. It was a genuine question. However, Thomas didn't get angry, he just gave a wry smile. "We're different people, so I don't feel jealous. I only get jealous of myself when I play well." Like, how did I manage to play like that day? I didn't fully understand what he meant, but Thomas's style of playing was more free-spirited than competitive. He would add his own arrangements and play freely. Thomas's performances always seemed full of joy. However, he didn't score well in competitions. I, who had believed that scoring well was everything, had assumed he was jealous of my good scores. But Thomas was simply free. He probably had more talent. The talent to enjoy music. Thomas did everything he could to protect me, and I spent the rest of my high school days away from music. During this time, his performance in competitions was spectacular. My parents were happy that he had met good mentors at university, but surely he had switched to competition-winning performances to divert my parents' attention from me. Having distanced myself from music as much as possible, I didn't even go to hear Thomas's competitions. But the sounds he practiced at home were different from before. I apologized to him many times. But Thomas always responded with a smile, saying, "For what?" I just started thinking about my future. When I graduated from high school, Thomas took me out of our parents' house. He became my guarantor for an apartment, and I moved in there. I think it's a good town. It was a place I didn't know at all. An hour away from home by train. Thomas said he had convinced our parents. I've told them roughly where it is, but they won't come barging in, so you can relax. Take your time to find what you love, what you want to do. With those words from Thomas, I felt like I had been given small wings. That's how it felt. After that, I started working part-time jobs. Thomas offered to send me money, but I refused. I didn't know how far I could make it, being naive about the world. But having gained those small wings, I wanted to try to find my own path, other than the piano. I threw myself into various part-time jobs in search of that path. Eventually, I was hired full-time at a security company. While directing traffic, musical notes would come to mind. The cars passing by my side were quarter notes and eighth notes. I wasn't ready to play the piano, but I had recovered enough that musical notes would pop into my head. Living fervently makes time fly by, and before I knew it, 10 years had passed since I moved to this place. January 1st was my day off. Thinking it would be bland to just sleep the day away, I casually headed to a slightly larger church nearby. Just as I was about to make a round and leave, an intense jolt of electricity coursed through my body. A cascade of sounds poured down. When I swiftly turned toward the sound, I saw several children, about elementary school age, playing the harp. I was captivated for a while by their forceful performance, unexpected from children. Music, which I had distanced myself from since quitting the piano, suddenly surged through me. However, wonderful as their performance was, it was just the beginning. Next appeared a goddess-like beauty in a stunning dress scattered with small flowers, based in soft greens and pinks. It was Wendy herself. Her beautifully tied black hair was adorned with a large floral hair accessory, which suited her perfectly. Her almond-shaped eyes were large. Her high nose bridge and slightly full lips were glossy, and she greeted with a slight smile that left me spellbound. But the moment her beautiful fingers touched the harp, my body tingled as if struck by lightning. First, she captivated with a strong, intense introduction, then a flow of continuous movements. I later learned that this technique was called tremolo, a way of strumming the harp that rapidly alternates to produce a sustained sound despite the harp's inherently fleeting notes. The delicate sounds produced by those fine finger movements were intense upon sight, shaking my soul. And, during a gentle part like the murmuring of water, I naturally found myself shedding tears. It felt like the first time I had truly encountered music that resonated within my heart. As soon as the performance ended, I rushed to the woman and volunteered to learn the harp. It was the moment I stepped back into the world of music. 2 years after that shocking encounter, I am now challenging myself with the longest piece I've ever played. It's a beautiful composition with highs and lows, and murmuring streams, much like my life so far. So, whenever I play this piece, I reflect on my past with pain and regret, but also savor the happiness of being involved with music I love now. When I finish, I'm slightly sweaty. As I let out a breath, Wendy claps her hands loudly. Yeah. I think you're getting much better. Especially at the beginning, there's a sense of tragedy that almost makes me cry. I blush a little at Wendy's praise. But after the sweet words come the whips. She carefully instructs me, checking each note on the score for dynamics and interpretation. After a long session, Wendy also sighs. Still, to think you've only been playing the harp for 2 years. Don't you feel like trying a competition soon? She asked with a smile, and I equivocated. I'm not good in front of people. I gave the usual excuse, and Wendy chuckled wryly. I wish more people could hear your music, Chris. It feels like a waste just for me to hear it. Today, Wendy, wearing a pink dress and her black hair in a half-up style, gave a light wink. My face turned red at her expression. I hurriedly began to pack up, using it to hide my embarrassment. I have no intention of participating in competitions or concerts, but I'm always willing to help out. Since starting to learn the harp, I had my security job switched to the night shift. I can't practice harp at night, so I work then, get some sleep, and spend all the time before work practicing. This way, I don't need to take time off for lessons, nor for preparing for concerts or competitions, which suits my lifestyle. Though it does leave me a bit sleepy. This day too, I was roped into a Sunday tea party event. Having worked until 5 a.m., I took a nap, then joined at 10 a.m. to help carry and check instruments. Those performing had to go through costume checks and the like, so I was busy handling various chores. As the event started and tea was served to guests, familiar tunes were played live on the harp. In such events, it's often Wendy, not the master, who takes charge. But Association's events like this have been successful, steadily increasing the number of students. It serves as a test for the students and a chance to experience the atmosphere of a real performance. Which is why we actively participate in tea parties and concerts. Then, an accident happened. One of the students' relatives passed away suddenly, so she had to leave the event unexpectedly. As a veteran student who was scheduled to perform solo, her absence would leave a gap in the program. Her performance was supposed to be in 2 hours, towards the end, and we could have proceeded with the next performance. But Wendy quietly approached me. Hey, would you like to give it a try? Her sudden proposal made my heart race. Not many people here are solely focused on the harp performance. They're here to enjoy their tea. Maybe you could play in a setting like this? Indeed, the live performance here was more akin to background music. Still, it wasn't that no one was listening. I swallowed nervously and looked at Wendy. Her carefree, sweet smile was nothing like the expectant stares of my parents. "I'll do it." The words came out naturally from my mouth. It might sound pretentious, but I never felt nervous when playing the piano. It was just about doing what I always do, the only change being from a room piano to a stage piano. But with the harp, it was different. I couldn't pinpoint why, but it definitely made me nervous. Of course, my inexperience was a major factor, and taking over for a veteran student was no small task. However, Wendy reassured me with a smile, "You're not replacing anyone, just let us hear your music." Encouraged by her smile, I took my place on the makeshift stage prepared for performances. The piece I was to play was the one I was currently practicing. Though still in practice, it was nearly complete, and as usual, I performed it reflecting on my life. Perhaps because it was a live performance, my emotions intensified, I made some mistakes, but managed to deliver a performance worth about 70 points. When I finished, scattered applause rang out, and I was startled. Hearing applause after so long, tears unexpectedly fell from my eyes. I made my greetings without letting anyone notice and quickly started packing up to leave. As I left, I bumped into an unexpected person. "Tom, why are you here?" There stood my brother Thomas, with a woman I didn't recognize. Wendy answered my puzzled look. I invited him, there was time before the performance. My confusion only deepened as I looked back and forth between my brother, the woman next to him, and Wendy. Thomas, with a wry smile, explained. "First off, the woman next to me is my fiancée, Emily. She also plays the piano. She's a junior from the same music university as me. And the same age as you. We didn't meet at university, though." Emily seemed a bit stern as she looked at me, but she greeted me lightly, so I greeted her back. And Wendy, she was a classmate of mine in high school. I was surprised and looked at Wendy. What? So this was set up from the beginning? But no, I just happened to visit the church on New Year's and was drawn to Wendy's harp playing. As I stumbled over my words, Thomas laughed. "It wasn't set up. But I did hope you would eventually meet Wendy, who runs a harp class in this town. You always seemed to like the harp, right? You'd always listen intently whenever it came on TV. Although I didn't quite understand, it did make sense. When the piano no longer brought me joy, listening to the harp had a calming effect on me. I never thought it would take 10 years to meet, though," Thomas concluded, leaving me with mixed feelings. I had no idea, so when Chris came to me wanting to learn the harp, I was truly surprised. Wendy complained, giving Thomas a stern look. "Wait, Wendy, you knew about me?" To my question, Wendy nodded with a smile. "Back in high school, your brother Thomas asked me to come support him at a competition he was in, and I was just one of many. Don't get it wrong." Wendy quickly made excuses to Emily, who stood silently by Thomas's side. Her flustered state was endearing, and I couldn't help but feel like laughing. I've always focused on the harp, so the sound of the piano was refreshing. I'd close my eyes and listen to various performances. And while Thomas's playing was wonderful, the moment I heard Chris's music, my heart was completely captured. At the time, I was a middle schooler. I was competing frequently, trying not to worry about the voices around me. Back then, I still found some joy in playing the piano. From then on, I went to competitions more to hear you play rather than Thomas, Wendy confessed. At her words, my brother laughed and said, "That's harsh." The laughter was cut off by Emily. I was there too. Silence fell for a moment as everyone looked at Emily. Time and again. "I competed in the same competitions as you, always missing out on the prizes." Emily faced me with an expression tinged with frustration. "At the competition you withdrew from, I brought my best piece, determined to beat you, and it ended in a walkover. You can't imagine how frustrating that was." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I found myself at a loss for words. Surely, many others must have felt this way too. Yet, I too had practiced and strived under heavy expectations to win those competitions. Faced with her frustration, there was nothing I could do. As I remained silent, Emily suddenly looked up with determination and announced, "Thomas proposed to me the other day." I was surprised. Wendy blushed slightly and looked at my brother, and he seemed embarrassed and flustered. "At our wedding, please play for us. I want to hear your music now." "I'd love to hear you play the piano, but the harp would be fine too. I always thought you'd go to the same conservatory as Thomas or even a better one. Instead of going to college. You quit playing the piano after high school, and I want to hear how you sound now. Her words sounded genuine, without any hint of sarcasm or jealousy. I found myself nodding honestly. As they had to leave soon, my brother and the others went home, but later, my phone was flooded with messages about today's performance. There were no derogatory comments, only compliments, and I had to smile wryly again, savoring the love my brother had always shown me. He had always been concerned about me. I wanted to repay that feeling. If it was my brother's wedding, our parents would be there too. I wanted to express my gratitude to them and tell them about the path I wished to pursue. It had been a long time since I'd felt so positive. As I finished cleaning up with a light heart, Wendy approached me hesitantly. Sorry for keeping silent. I shook my head at her apology. On the day I had asked to join her class, Wendy, hiding her surprise, had contacted my brother. Since they hadn't spoken since graduating high school, she had worried his number might have changed, but it hadn't, and he answered her call. She had been entrusted by Thomas to take care of my brother. Knowing she was aware of my circumstances and had watched over me without getting too involved warmed my heart. I've been watched over all this time. I'm happy. Thank you, I said. At my words, the tension seemed to melt from Wendy. It's presumptuous to ask, but would you play with me at my brother's wedding? Wendy's eyes widened at my request. I shouldn't, it's your family's big day. I vigorously shook my head. Really, a solo by you would be more appropriate. Prefacing my next words, I took her hand. I want to perform with you. Of course, I'm not as skilled, and I might hold you back, but I've been thinking about something. I shared my idea with her, and she exclaimed, I'd like to try that. Her smile gave me another boost of courage. And if that goes well, would you consider going out with me? I've liked you since I heard that performance on New Year's, I confessed. Wendy was surprised but then slightly raised the corners of her mouth. Are you going to keep me waiting any longer? Surprised by her words, I responded. I've been a fan of your music since the day I heard you play. It's been almost 20 years now. Teased with her playful smile, I was momentarily frozen. Are you going to keep me waiting until Thomas's wedding? At that, I shook my head vigorously and said, No, please be my girlfriend now. I beg you, and I tightly held Wendy's hand. She responded with a smile. Several months later. At the wedding reception of my brother, everything went smoothly, and it was finally time for Wendy and me to perform. A grand piano, previously used by the newlyweds, was still set up at the venue. We began by placing a harp in front of it, starting with a duet. Wendy's warm notes led my modest playing, enveloping the venue. We performed an original piece suitable for the celebration, and after our duet, Wendy began her solo. Then, I rose from the harp and moved to the piano. The room buzzed slightly with surprise. As Wendy's solo concluded, my piano solo began, taking over seamlessly. It had been 15 years since I last played the piano seriously. Tears had flowed when I first played the keys again in practice. I never thought I'd have my fingers on these white keys again. I shouldn't get sentimental. Today was about celebrating my brother. I had to play my best to honor his new beginning. My performance was the freest I had ever played, as if the notes soared into the sky. My piano solo fades out, and Wendy's harp begins to play. It's a duet between my piano and Wendy's harp. My clumsy harp playing and the piano I've been familiar with since childhood. Wendy supports me with everything I have now. I wished this moment could last forever, but eventually, our performance reached its finale. When the last note finally faded, the reception hall erupted in thunderous applause. The MC handed me the microphone. Surprised, I looked at my brother, who glanced at our parents. Understanding his intent, I stood and first offered words of celebration. Thank you for listening. Thomas, Emily, congratulations on your wedding. Emily, this is all of me now, I said. Emily nodded repeatedly with teary eyes. Perhaps I had managed to thaw her heart a bit. Then, I looked towards our parents. I'm sorry for being an unworthy son. But, I am happy to have a life with music. Thanks to the harp, I felt that joy again. So, as I was about to continue, our parents nodded their heads. Their expressions seemed to say, "We understand everything." So, I changed my words. "Please, come to Wendy's and my wedding next." The announcement sent the room into an uproar. Thomas joked, "Whose celebration is this?" but his face was filled with satisfaction, and I could see tears in his eyes. A year later. As promised, Wendy and I got married. At our wedding, Thomas and Emily, having further honed their skills, performed a piano duet that enchanted the venue with luxurious moments. It was daunting to follow such a splendid performance, but seeing Wendy in her bridal dress, all my nerves vanished. This time, Wendy and I performed only on the harp. My playing was still far from perfect compared to Wendy's. She had touched the harp since childhood. However, I had improved gradually with my innate musical sense, and recently, I had even won a special prize at a major competition. Though hesitant to compete, Wendy convinced me it was necessary to insert some external validation into my self-assessments. The prize we won together surprisingly boosted my confidence, and this time, I decided to compete solely with the harp, without relying on my piano skills. Though still imperfect, the audience generously showered us with warm applause. Our parents' smiling faces were clearly visible. Thomas and Emily also applauded us heartily. Throughout my life, I had always been watched over and loved by others. Now, it's my turn to give back unreserved love to Wendy, our families, our friends, and eventually, to our future children. As the beautiful sounds of the harp still echoed in my mind, I was filled with happiness.